Hello and welcome everyone to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from women in digital who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughn, and I'm the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital and choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can learn more about us at www.togetherindigital.com. And this week, I'm really excited to introduce all of you to Margaret Murphy. Leadership is a big conversation among our members. We do a lot of peer groups. We do a lot of in-person events. We do a lot of asking and giving on our Slack channels. And almost every woman I've ever talked to at some point says, I want to brush up on my leadership skills. So when we are able to get a hold of and bring in a leader such as Margaret, I'm always really excited because it's, finding one, a woman who owns an agency is difficult. And two, a woman who is willing to share, her honest experience and advice is also such a great gift. So Margaret, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Amy. Appreciate it. And congrats to you. This is a phenomenal, I applaud everybody attending, not because I'm speaking, but just because I think as women, the fact that we're now virtual, it just allows us to connect easier and meet new people. And so it's fun to see where everybody's from. And I think it's a great platform. So congrats to you too.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's my honor, my pleasure every day. So a little bit about Margaret. She believes in fostering authentic human connections as being the single most important driver of business and societal progress. She is the founder and CEO of Bold Orange, a leading customer experience agency focused on modernizing the ways that brands connect with their customers. In 2021, Bold Orange was named the best place to work, both by nationally by Inc. magazine and locally by MPLS St. Paul Business Journal. Forrester has also named Bold Orange Company an agency to watch due to the measurable impact that they're delivering to their clients, which anybody in digital, that makes you kind of do like a little dance. You're like, woohoo, measurable impact. That's like, yes. Prior to Bold Orange, Margaret was the president and CEO of Olson, Minneapolis's largest agency. There, she quadrupled the company's revenue, greatly expanded its capabilities, and significantly diversified its employee base. Holla, holla. Named a woman to watch and the winner of Top 40 Under 40 by Minneapolis St. Paul Business Journal, her strengths in building cultures that foster empowerment, inspiration, growth, and scale. Well done, Margaret. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. And before we get even further into leadership and the culture building aspect of things, which I know many of us are going to have questions about today, I would just love for you to share a little bit about your career journey specifically outside of what I just read in that lovely bio of yours.
Yeah, I can touch a little bit on that. I will say my entrepreneurial spirit actually started when I was in high school. So I grew up in a small town, 2,000 people, and the local Dairy Queen, if you will, type ice cream shop wasn't going to open. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? There's nothing to do." So I actually called the owner and said, "Would you allow me to lease it from you and run it? And I'll hire my brothers." And so that's kind of how my entrepreneurial piece started. But I spent the majority of my career, honestly, at a global $1 billion global company called Carlson Marketing Group. And they were headquartered in Minneapolis, but they had offices all over the world. And I was there for 16 years. I loved it. I learned a ton. I ran large businesses. I traveled the world and formed incredible teams. But I left there after 16 years, really because I wanted to, that entrepreneurial spirit, I just wanted to try something on my own and with some friends and see if I could do that. So I left and I joined 4 partners, all male, but they were friends, to start a company called Denali Marketing. And we focused mainly in the loyalty marketing, kind of one-to-one space, kind of CRM. And I was president of that company. And after a few years, we sold that business into private equity. That's when I joined Olson, which at the time was the largest agency in Minneapolis. And we went on and we bought PR companies and mobile marketing companies and consulting companies, and we formed kind of a larger entity that could really serve clients end to end. And then we sold that business into a public company called ICF, which was out of Fairfax, Virginia. And that division's now called ICF Next. And I stayed on and did that for a little bit. And then in 2016, I left there and did what I refer to as my adult gap year. which I highly recommend for everyone. It's not just for kids anymore.
Right.
So I did an adult gap year, and people say, well, what did you do? And I met with a bunch of people, but honestly, probably the biggest thing that I did was I let my soul catch up to my body. Is I had been running and going and moving so fast, and I loved it, but I just needed kind of my soul to catch up to my body. So I took that year, and it was like, okay, well, what do I want to do next, and what does it look like? And I love working with people, and I love solving problems. So in 2017, I said, well, I'm going to kind of try it on my own. And let's be clear, it's not on my own, but I didn't have partners. And so we launched Bold Orange Company. We call it BOCO, with the vision to be a leading customer experience company that helps brands, outperform, whether it's acquisition, growth, or retention. And so I'm proud of the fact that, at the time, customer experience wasn't that talked about. The agency space in my mind was built around capability. I'm a creative agency, I'm a media agency, I'm a data agency, I'm a consultant. And I felt like they weren't focused on who do they serve. Well, we serve customers, and how do we do that? We build experiences. And so we're proud of the fact that our creation story was kind of pre-COVID. Now it's all anybody talks about is customer experience. But
Yeah, you're ahead of the curve.
So that's a little bit about me and kind of the journey that I've been on.
I love that. And I love that you went back and noted that kind of entrepreneurial spirit in your childhood, because very similar. I went straight to agencies and worked for 14 years in agencies, and then didn't become a business partner nor owner until I was in my 40s. But when I was a kid, that's all I ever did was start clubs and groups and businesses. So any of you who are teetering with the idea of becoming entrepreneurs or going out on your own, and I know some of you on here are, look back at your childhood. If you had that passion when you were a kid, there's a good chance you'll have passion for it again. And I love that phrase, let your soul catch up to your body. I don't know how many of you really felt that too, but I totally felt that. I think after so many years, sometimes in this industry, you kind of become a bit numb to who you are and how you really feel. And so it's really hard for you to kind of stop and take time to recognize that. So kudos to you. I think other people are fearful of that gap year as well and what it could do for their career. So you sharing that, I think, is just hopefully giving some of you reassurance and proof that, taking some kind of a gap or some kind of a break isn't going to break you. It's actually going to help you come back stronger. Because one of the questions I didn't have down on here, but I was curious about, is sort of the name Bold Orange and kind of where it came from. Because again, I think another thing is once you start to think about doing something on your own is, what's the niche, what's the brand? And that could almost make some people be like, okay, never mind, I'm not doing this.
Yeah, I mean, the name came from I think I like to be bold, and I think when you're bold, you feel good, and it kind of gives air in your lungs, right? And you're just a little bit lighter. And then orange, one, I like the color, but it's a blend of red and yellow in the spectrum of light. And the goal with Bold Orange was to blend, strategy and content, media and technology, communities and purpose. And if we blend those things together and we're bold, we're going to make progress, which ties to our purpose, which is that we believe authentic human connections drive business and societal progress. So if we can bring people together, we can bring purpose together, and we're bold, we're going to help both the communities from which we live and the brands from which we serve make progress. So that's kind of the name behind the name.
I love it. I'm a nerd for that kind of stuff. I love when the creative, the strategy, the messaging, it all kind of fits together. And clearly it's all been very well thought out. So kudos to you on that. And then the other sort of sneaky question I wanted to bring in was, what kind of guidance and, experiences would you feel comfortable sharing? Like, what was the dynamic when you were the only woman working in a partnered business with two other men? Like, how did you kind of approach that? What was your mindset there?
It was 4 men.
Okay. Oh, wow.
I grew up with
one.
I figured part of my story is I survived that time, and they're still all good friends, but I have 5 brothers, so I was somewhat used to it. But it was different. There was just, people that you read the book, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and it's true. You just think differently, and not for in the outcomes you want that could be very aligned, but how you get there, or your approaches to things are different. And I think for us, what we did well, because I think a lot of times things like this don't work well, is we would meet once a month at night out of the day-to-day business. We would have dinner together and we would talk through things. And there was certainly bumps, big bumps. But we really kind of kept that as sacred time to be like, all right, we need to make sure that we stay aligned, or, have arguments or disagree or whatever, but come back to and agree that, whatever we decide there, we're all going to get on board and move it forward. And so, we had some things like that in place, process and governance wise, that we were really true to. I also think we ended up, not on purpose, but in the end, we actually complemented each other pretty well from our skill sets. So
Right.
I'm very much the people person, and probably more, I don't know, empathetic is the right word, but more in the sense of was very attuned to employees and what they needed. And I had
Yeah.
one partner who's very strategic, but he preferred to be like behind the desk, and I don't really want to be out. And I had another partner who was very much kind of a, out and about, but didn't really want to get into the day-to-day work. And so everybody kind of complemented each other. One of them was more of a finance mindset, so could really help us as the business grew. But I will say at the onset, we didn't realize the complementary aspects that we had. So there's probably a little bit of luck in that too.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm 100% very fortunate, because partnerships, in an ideal world sound fantastic, but they can be quite challenging. But I think there's a certain level of, self-awareness required by all of those involved to kind of know where the strengths lie, because then you kind of fuse together and you're all a bit of superhumans to be able to run and grow a business, because it's no small feat. So that's really great. That's really great. All right, let's talk leadership then. Leadership is one of the most sought out topics by our listeners, and topic of conversation within our Together Digital community, as I mentioned earlier. And so, leadership is kind of a broad stroke term. So I was curious, as far as you see it, Margaret, how do you define leadership?
Well, I think before I would even define it, I would say I'm a firm believer that leadership is not like a title. Like it's I don't view it as a title, right? I think some people think, well, I'm a leader because my title starts with an E or a C or a V, and I emphatically don't agree with that. So taking that aside, I think everybody can be a leader, and that leadership is an art, and that management's a job. And so, my job is the CEO and founder of Bold Orange. I also choose to lead it, right? And I think there's a very distinct thing there. So, leadership to me, in a definition, if I had to, is really the ability to influence, like in a way that inspires, develops, and empowers people to come together and make progress. And I think that's that. I think great leadership to me is those that can do that in service of others. So always leading through the lens of those they serve, and that they've built, enough respect and trust, so now they can influence. And I think, again, that can start very young in your career, very young in your life,
Really?
of how does that work? And so that to me is really the definition.
I love that. I love that answer 110%, because whenever I get asked, it's like, I want to be in more of a leadership role. And I was like, what about what you're doing right now isn't leadership? Like you said, it's that intentional action of, leading and inspiring, bringing people together. You can kind of lead from anywhere, honestly. I agree with you. It doesn't have to be in your title. I love that. I think it's also, hopefully, for those who are listening, something that allows for freeing up their mindset of what leadership is, what it looks like, and what it means. I think really early on too, I, before I was really kind of, my eyes were open to the gender disparities, specifically within our industry. And obviously this industry is not the only one. And I was listening to a panel discussion on it at Design Week, I think it was. And one woman was talking about the fact that, leadership isn't a title, and what you consider what looks like a leader doesn't have to be, the gender definition of a leader, and so that's another thing too. It's like a lot of times we think we have to act more like men than women, when leaning into our womanhood to actually lead. And I would always argue the opposite. I mean, you have to lead from a place that's authentic. Otherwise, like you said, you don't have the trust of people to then kind of bring them together. So that's fantastic. That leads nicely, though, into our next question, which is, what is your leadership style or philosophy, and what sorts of experience brought these ideas and views about for you?
Well, I define Bold Orange as professionally sassy. So if
I
that's
like
kind
it.
of our tone. So
Uh-huh.
that says a little bit. I am also known for meat raffles and Jello shots, so I can be fun. But as far as style, I think people that know me best would, kind of describe my style as direct, authentic. I instill confidence both in where we're going and what we're doing, but also in them. I want them to have a point of view. I want them to do that. I'm empathetic and supportive, but with accountability, and I can share more on that. Progress focused, hopefully inspirational. And for me, it's, my biggest thing, people say, like, what's your pet peeve? I very much walk the talk. So I don't expect anybody to do anything that I wouldn't do.
Yes.
And my pet peeve is somebody that says they're going to do something and then they don't do it. So that's kind of, I think, my style from that
Love
perspective.
that. I used to work at an agency where the general manager was like, we all make the coffee around here. And one day I was like, where's the coffee machine? He's like, and I think too, throwing those words in, like empathy and servant leadership, I really hope people keep using more language around that, because those are the kinds of leaders that we do need. There was something else you said too that sparked another question, but I didn't write it down on my marker board, so it's not going to come
well,
back
the one
to
thing
me.
I would call in the empathy, and it's with that, it's tied with accountability, right? And I think right now in the marketplace, people are saying, well, geez, with the talent and how do I do things? To me, to build a high performing culture, you have to have empathetic and servant leadership, but you also have to have accountability with that.
Yes,
Meaning,
that's what
if somebody just wants to do poor work and complain, but they want empathy and it's continual, it's like, all right, but you need to also hone your skills and deliver, and high performers want to work with high performers, right? And I think toxic cultures enable, you can be empathetic, but empathetic, you almost get taken advantage of versus, hey, we had a woman this week, she was supposed to take a trip and she ended up getting COVID. And we felt terrible for her. She got 3 kids. She and her husband were going to get away. They were going to go to Mexico. Well, we sent her a big basket of tequila and a bunch of, and just said, we're bringing Mexico to you, right? And she's an incredible talent. But we were very empathetic. Like, we felt terrible. Like, what a bummer for her. For us, we were prepared. She was going to be out. It didn't do anything to the business. But as a leader, you're like, wait a minute, let's really send her. And she's like, it brought a tear to my eye. Like, I love the fact that you guys cared that much to put that all together and, courier it over. So it's making sure that you're empathetic, but that you also have a culture of accountability.
That's exactly what it was. You brought it right back. Thank you. It was accountability, because I do think that is a challenge for a lot of women. So what are some of the techniques and tools and resources that you've leveraged to help kind of balance your ability to be an empathetic leader with also drawing some lines and creating some accountability?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is just walking the talk, right? If I say, I want us to do this, and then I don't do it, well, why does it matter? Or, when we have somebody that maybe isn't accountable in their role, we're not going to, not address it. We're going to kind of address it in real time, and we're going to have direct conversations. And I spend a lot of time with my management team of, nope, address this. And, well, this person has a problem. Well, we'll just kind of talk about something else. No, let's address it. And so I think, honestly, it's just really being committed to it and making sure that you're in the right moments doing things that drive accountability, and that you openly talk about it, and that it's expected that we're going to hit deadlines, we're going to deliver for our clients, we're going to stand for something. And if you know what you stand for, then you have a North Star that you can kind of drive people toward and hold them accountable.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. I was doing a little bit of digging and research, and we're going to kind of pivot now out of leadership and more into culture, because it has been a big and a hot topic. There was research on it before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID. And some of the more recent studies were talking about how 69% of millennials, which we know now is pretty much the majority of the workforce currently, are concerned that their workplace does not develop their leadership skills. So I guess it's a little leadership, a little bit culture. And yet, in a business, 83% of companies say that developing leaders is crucial. And I can tell you, again, talking to professional, ambitious women day in and day out for the last 2.5, almost 3 years, anytime I talk to a woman who's about ready to leave a company, it's because she does not see the growth opportunities. Yet this research is saying that even more of the organizations are saying, yeah, developing leaders is critical. So what are your thoughts on this gap?
I think there is a gap, but I also think part of the issue is that companies' employees kind of need to align on what leadership means to them, because I think it means different things to different companies. So when people start or when they get promoted, do they know what's expected of them? You know, at Bold Orange, we take every new employee kind of through what we call our brand guide. And yes, there's colors and things like that, but really it's, here's our vision, here's our purpose, here's our beliefs. You know, we talk about our traits and kind of guardrails for how we show up. So we say, you know, we're fearless, but not reckless. We're purposeful, but never random. And we talk about how we want others to kind of perceive us, right? You know, we're smart and polished, we're nimble and proactive, we're trusted and invested. And so an employee knows, okay, now I know what's expected of me. So now they can start to lead in that way. But I definitely think there's a gap. And I think people, again, kind of confuse title and leadership, right? You know, and so to me, I think it's also being able to make it a louder topic of conversation. People look at it as training. Leadership happens if there's a training program. And I think leadership can happen, you know, in the moment. And so, you know, again, I really truly believe that leadership's an art. You're constantly crafting it, you're constantly learning it. So for me, if, you know, maybe I'm in a meeting and there's a conversation with somebody and I can say, oh, wow, I can see they're struggling with whatever we're talking about. And so I'll say, okay, John, why don't you share more? What, you know, tell us a little bit more. And all of a sudden John's demeanor changes and John like got more engaged because he was heard more, he was ever. Afterwards, I may say to somebody that was in the meeting, hey, did you see how John's demeanor changed? Because I invited him into the conversation in a bigger way. And, you know, you do it in the moment a little bit. And I think people like, to me, it's not a class, it's not a curriculum. It's, are you building a culture of, you know, leadership moments or reframing things for people so that they know, you know, this is what leadership can look like, you know, and I also think you have to look at your management teams or your managers and, you know, are you consciously asking them that leadership is a goal? You know, do they have employee experience scores or, you know, they have goals around kind of what I refer to as like leadership practicing, which is in that moment, are you doing your part? And I think companies need to make leadership not a topic, but more of a way that they work and not a class. I mean, certainly classes are valuable, but again, it's these moments and things. And are your managers have scores on them for leading in addition to delivering results or whatever that looks like. So
Oh, that would be a nice world because you do tend to have that imbalance, right? Where you've got hyper performing people as leaders, quote unquote leaders or leader titles that aren't great managers. You know, it's like they can perform well, but managing people is not their jam. And I also agree with you very much in the sense that I think the most natural and likely leaders, regardless of where you are in the world, when you look all across the world, it's a mindset. You know, it's a mindset and it's something that you kind of just put into practice every single day. So yeah, for those of you who are listening, because I know there are a lot of you out there that are feeling like, okay, I'm stuck where I am. A lot of times when I'm coaching or mentoring, it is like, well, look at what you are doing and how are you leading currently within the role that you're doing. It's not a title. It's not always a class. I agree with you, Margaret. Maybe have that conversation with your manager to say, hey, this is what leadership looks like and feels like to me. And I don't feel like I'm getting it. How can we align on what it is? Because you're right, Margaret, like they might be seeing it in a completely different light. They might be looking at you thinking you're doing tons of leading. What, you want more, you know? And if you don't give your employer that opportunity, there's a missed opportunity for both of you there. So I love that. That was great.
And I think millennials need to be conscious of their role in the process too, right? Like, are they, you know, proactively leaning in when they're given an opportunity? Like, kind of go figure this out. Well, do you go figure it out, or do you say, I didn't know what to do, right? And you know, they have to invest in their own personal brand, right? You know, how they show up and the quality of their work. So I talk a lot about personal brands, and it's like, what do you want to be known for? You know, are people moving toward you? Are they moving away from you? You know, when you get given an opportunity, you might think back to like, how do you turn on the coffee pot? You might be like, I don't want to do that. Really? Oh my gosh, like it's great. So I also think they just need to, you know, realize that it's a two-way street. There's, you know, that leadership takes work.
It does. You're right. And it is a two-way street. That's great advice. Awesome. Okay. So really for real, now on to culture. The word authenticity, it's something that kind of gets thrown around a lot when it comes to workplace culture. But it's, you know, it's just because you say you're authentic, obviously doesn't make it so. So my question for you is, what are some strategies for us as leaders? Because you all are leaders, how can we start to help create some authenticity within our workplace?
Yep. I do think some of this does start at the top. I had a boss once tell me a fish stinks from the head. And at the time, I was like, what?
What?
What? But it's like, does the
True.
CEO value authenticity? Does the board of
Yeah.
directors, do they value that? Do they walk the talk and kind of use human speak? Do they reward that authenticity in their management team, or do they just reward numbers and you're a crappy boss, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
organizations need to look at that. But specific strategies to me kind of comes down to like hiring profiles, right? So what are you conscious of what type of people you're looking for? If your culture is, we refer to our culture as very human. But do the people you're interviewing value that, right? Or it's, I just want a job, or I just want this skill, but I don't really want to connect. I don't need the connection side. And there's people like that, right? So it's like, is your hiring profile consistent? And does it start with people that really value the human connection? And that doesn't need to be, physical, meaning in the same building, but is that? I think that's the strategy. I think the culture attributes, are you a company that does address things in the moment? It's not passive aggressive, or you
Mm.
encourage sharing points of view, you kind of you really value people, and it shows up in how you act. Versus, I think a lot of people that I talk to say, oh, I work for a company and they say they value us, but it doesn't show up, right? And value doesn't mean that employee gets everything they want.
Right.
Value means that we make decisions and we architect things and we invest in things that, bring you personal value. And we know what's important to you, right? What's important to this person, probably it might not be important to that person. And we take enough time to understand that. So I think, certain culture attributes, certainly communication. I always say, like, don't talk Dilbert, which is just this, mumbo jumbo stuff. Like, are we
Yeah.
really just saying it like it is? Like, this
Yeah.
went really well last week, or guys, we're really struggling. Like, this has been really hard, or the business is suffering, or we're kind of, sweeping it under the rug. So I think communication is good. And then for sure, to me, a strategy is just really celebrating that diversity,
Mhm.
whether it's gender, race, religion, whatever it is, but really being open to different ways of thinking or different points of view, and not having people, even if it's a group of all Caucasian men in a room, thinking, well, one person's viewpoint isn't different. Like, are you actually
Yeah.
celebrating diverse points of view and encouraging points of view? And I think a lot of organizations, one of my struggles with, talent is have a point of view, like show up and have a
Yeah.
point of view. And
Yeah.
some people just, don't necessarily do that. So, you be you and really mean it.
I love it. I think that goes back to your advice too about personal brand. We had a great talk. I mean, this is probably years ago now. It was within our Cincinnati chapter, and we talked a lot about personal brand, but then also trust and authenticity. As you're kind of building up that personal brand for yourself, make sure that it's one, really you, because people really look at like that overlap between what you say and what you do, as far as to how much they'll trust you. And then that character, are you acting within your normal character, or are you deviating from your character to do someone else's walk and talk? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I also
Yeah.
feel like, at least what it sounds like with Bold Orange, you all have done a great sense of creating a well-defined sense of direction for the organization, so that as people are coming in, they feel hopefully aligned, but then they also bring their own personal point of view. But POV to me is absolutely important. Like I love branding, so I'm trying not to turn up too much and deviate the conversation completely. But I was making that case in that argument with a lot of my clients in the past, that it's like tone of voice, yeah, but point of view is, I think, more important. What is your brand's perspective and lens that is different, that's going to be of benefit to the consumer and align with what they want and need.
Yeah.
So I won't nerd out too much more over that. But I think I mean, kudos to you. It's no small feat to try to kind of, lead and balance, accountability with authenticity, because it can make things messy, but I don't know. Sometimes I think once you get to the other side of it and people are comfortable and they can be direct and they can be themselves, kind of gets through all that extra BS, like all that Dilbert talk you were
Yeah.
talking about, it's just like, cut to it. It's so much
Yeah.
more efficient when we don't have the extra drama. I'm a fan.
Right.
So the role of culture in strengthening employee connections has grown even more so important, while also becoming equally more difficult to define and to champion during COVID. So what are some of the ways that you've been a champion of culture before, during, and maybe even after COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I think just kind of like what we talked about. So before COVID, like I interview everybody that we hire.
Nice.
And then I check in with them 3 weeks, about on average, about 3 weeks after they start. And so back to like valuing that authentic connection, like people feel it right away. And I've had 75% of the people I hire, I've never had an interview with a CEO. And it's like, well, you're important to me. So now I know them, right?
Yeah.
And now we do an all company meeting every 3 weeks, and I can, give a shout out, or I can say, hey, Graham, how's it going? And so there's this, again, it's kind of at the beginning, they realize how much we value kind of that authenticity. And so, I've been very conscious of that. And we give people a chance to present at our meetings, and bring their own personal brands forward and highlight different things. And so I think before COVID, we had a good foundation going into COVID. I will say in COVID, back to
Yeah.
how do you build it? I sent everybody home, and I'm like, oh yeah, we'll be back in like 2 weeks. Don't worry about it, right? I think everybody
Right.
did.
I
And
love
then it
that.
was like after 2 weeks, you're like, we're not gonna be back.
Yeah.
And I wanted us, because we were in a good spot, I wanted us to like, how do you continue to have that connection, and what does that look like? And so I started an email, and I sent an email one morning, and I said, I called it the bold, brave bit. And I said, you're going to get an email from me every morning. And, it's something you can expect. It's going to talk about what's going on. It might talk about whatever. And I thought it would take me like 5 minutes. I'll just do it. And
Yeah.
I'm known for like really bad jokes, not like inappropriate jokes, but just
Sure.
really bad
Morning.
jokes. And so I always put them in emails and stuff. So they always included that. But these emails then kind of would take me like an hour or two every night. It would be, I'd tell a story about something, or I'd find something in the news and
Yeah.
highlight somebody, a healthcare worker, or we'd talk about, the just different things of the Picasso Blue series and why it was that, and really trying to just give people, and then we talked about the business, and we talked about, we know it's hard, and it's okay to be vulnerable, and lean on your friends, and if you need to punch out, find a coworker and they'll cover for you. And it just became something. And afterwards, I just heard from employees that it allowed them kind of a sense of peace and a sense of connection
Yeah.
that they really appreciated. So that's kind of how I pivoted in the middle of that. And then after COVID, I'm not sure we're after COVID yet, but we just continue to be purposeful in how we're trying to, and how and where and when we're trying to connect with people and make sure that it works for them.
That's wonderful. That's such a good idea, and such a great way to kind of keep people feeling like they're in touch and in tune with what's going on. I mean, I started working remote just prior to COVID, and it definitely, it impacts us all so differently. Some of us are like, woohoo, I'm never going back. And I'm kind of somewhere in the middle where it's like, I definitely don't mind the peace and the quiet, the flexibility, but I also miss the energy and the noise of being in a work environment. So as soon as those numbers went down, I started going and working from a coffee shop 1 or 2 days a week, just so I could have that kind of ambient noise and just people around. So I think, for those of you who are listening, if you're struggling, there's ways around. We do for Together Digital, we do every Tuesday, a virtual co-working hour from 4 till 5 Eastern. And it's like, every time I realize it's Tuesday, I get so happy, because I'm just going to hang out and banter with these ladies and talk about the random gadgets we might have on our desk, what shows we might be watching. And I'm like, oh, this is what it feels like to be human. We'll get a little work done. We'll answer emails. We'll collaborate on some stuff. But yeah, you just kind of miss those hallway conversations and those more human interactions throughout your day when you're kind of just sat in front of your computer in this little box that we're all living in. So
Amy,
Deb, yeah.
can I ask? So, longtime client and mentee of Margaret's, first time caller. Hi, Margaret.
Hi, David. How are you?
From Great River Energy, and we've always been, we have followed Margaret. We're a client of Bold Orange. Full disclosure, I'm not a plant, but one of the things that
I didn't know he was here.
Margaret reeks of authenticity, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit, Margaret, too, because one thing we've noticed as a client of yours is that we watch like the best and the brightest talent follow you, and that's so unique. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to the leadership importance. And you talked to me about sort of that and then some piece, but how you from the top set that tone. And I think you mentioned the interviews and really ingraining it folks from the day they walk into your office as a new hire. But how important is it for leadership to appreciate and carry that to keep the best and brightest and retain the best talent like you do?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, thanks, David. It's nice to see you. Very kind of you. David's great, by the way. I think for me, and I'm grateful, like you start a business, you think, does a client care, right? And David does. And do employees that you've worked with in the past, are they going to follow you? And, I'm grateful that they have. And I think part of that is that, I've invested a lot of time in getting to know people and valuing them and empowering them and giving them an opportunity. And people would say, who work for Margaret Murphy, she can be tough, but she's fair. And she gives us opportunity. And I always say, I believe in them most of the time more than they believe in themselves. And so they look back and go, gosh, like I learned a lot from her, or I learned a lot, in the environments that she creates. And I want that learning or that curiosity environment. And I think it's just a lot of hard work and just being purposeful in really connecting with people, making sure that they're conscious of the opportunities that they have. And in the moment, again, saying, oh, did you guys just see what you learned there? Like, that was incredible. People just go through the day, right? You don't really stop and kind of acknowledge what's going on. And I think people need that context, or they need somebody that's going to be like, okay, time out. Let's just talk about what happened here, and create that learning environment that also allows them to teach, so it's kind of a learn, teach, coach. And I think the people that like that, again, I'm super grateful for them following me.
Yeah, you take care of them, they take care of you. I started to write that down a little bit earlier. That's so true. Like the people that you show up for when you're in a leadership position, like they're going to show up for you, and they're going to, because you've built that trust. I was lucky enough to have a working partner who said that very early in my career. She's like, the things that matter most in any work relationship or any given relationship is trust and respect. If you don't have those two things for one another, it's just not ever really going to go anywhere. And then you do find it's like those become legacy professional relationships, like you said, where you can call on them and say, hey, you want to come work with me? And they're always like, absolutely. It's not even a question, because you've made that effort and made that time. So great question. We had two others come through from the chat. So I'm going to hop to those really quick, and then we'll open it up again if anybody wants to hop in. Deb would love to hear your thoughts on quote unquote FaceTime/office time and the impact on culture. I believe that the return to office or insisting on camera or on-site work can actually work against inclusive culture and make people feel like FaceTime matters more than quality of work. There's a recent trending article on this, so she's just curious to hear your thoughts.
I probably read that article. I've kind of a couple thoughts on that. One, I do think you have to have an environment that is, I don't mandate anything. Like, we're all adults. If you act like an adult, I'm going to treat you like an adult, right? If you act like a child, I'll probably say, what are we doing here? But you have to assume that. Yep. But I will say for myself, it's back to that authentic human connection. I don't think any of us can say in our life that our closest relationships are to people that we've never seen or never been with. Our closest relationships are people that we see or that we've been with. And so I value that. I think certain cultures don't necessarily value that, and that's fine. I don't want to, our office is, we ask people to come in 1 day a week. We don't mandate it. But I guess worry a little bit on, I don't know if it's society or businesses, you build your career, and it's like David, right? I've worked with David in 3 different companies. I've worked with some of these employees in 4 different companies. Wow. And I did that because I got to know them and they got to know me. And at the time I was, AE making $7.34 an hour. I wasn't a CEO of a company, and I'm still friends with them, and I'm now working with them, right? And so I think, I don't think you can judge somebody for not being on camera or not being in an office, and you can't, I totally agree with that. But I think you have to decide how much you value that human interaction, and then just make a point to, how does that still happen in kind of this virtual world, right? Is it 1 day a week? Is it twice a month? Is it 3 days a week? But I look at myself and I think I learned so much from being in an office environment at the time, which was very normal, but not on the things I was working on the things that the person next to me was working on, right? And I'd be like, what are you talking about? I didn't know that. Or I'd have lunch and it would be a cross-functional group of people, and I got to learn a lot. And in a Teams meeting or on Zoom, right, we're all quiet. You have something you want to talk about, but you're like, oh, we're almost out of time, not going to do it.
Yeah.
Or you got people that are doing all the talking and the new people are like, oh, I don't know enough yet. So I don't think
Yes,
there's a right answer. I
sure.
think it's what is important to you, right?
Mhm.
But I will just say I firmly believe the the best relationships that we have in life are because we see each other and we are close to each
Yes.
other. And I worry that young people, so we've hired a lot of people right out of college, and
Yeah.
they're fine working in their apartment by themselves, but you're 45, maybe you're at a different company, you get let go or whatever, and you're like, what are your relationships? Well, I've never been on camera, I've never seen anybody, and now I've got to have a network
Mhm.
that builds this. And do I have that network, right? And that's what people have to be conscious of, is how are you building your network in a virtual environment, and they just need to be conscious of how to do it.
I know a good way. Just kidding. We do. Like, I feel like because of the kind of conversations that we have, and I even will want to say thank you to everyone who's asking questions, because I feel like the questions themselves as well are highly vulnerable. And I appreciate that, because it is not easy to create a safe space in this virtual world we live in. And there are many, I mean, I've Deb is one of my nearest and dearest, and I've met her in person once, Deb, maybe, is that right? So I can't wait to see her again. But shared space, I agree with you, Margaret. There is something to having that same physical shared space, that energy, those additional conversations. One thing that you mentioned that I honestly hadn't even thought about, speaking up. You're right. Like, we are more boxed in, like physically and literally and whatever, than we ever have been. So yeah, how many more people are sitting by and not speaking up in a meeting because they don't feel like there's that window of opportunity either before, during, or after a meeting? That's a really great point. We had another kind of really good, open, vulnerable question here from Christy. Christy, I'm going to read it, and then if you want to add context, you can come off of mute and do that by all means. Going back to leadership, one idea I've heard a lot of is that leadership at any level kind of aligns with what you were saying, Margaret, about how we don't need a title to be a leader. But to me as an employee, I feel like they want me to go above and beyond, but I'm not necessarily getting paid for it. And it's not necessarily helping me get me a promotion either. From a management perspective, how do you encourage people to be leaders without them feeling like they're being taken advantage of?
Yep, that's a good question. I would say again, you can lead every day. It sounds like what you're looking for is to move up in management, which is a job and a promotion, not necessarily leadership. Yes, again, the world kind of defines it that way. I think it's, sitting down with your boss and saying, this is what I aspire to be, whether it's a senior something, it's whatever, and what are the steps that I need to do to get there? And what in your mind, because this is back to, I think there's a lot of managers that don't talk to their direct reports on, here's the two things that are holding you back. I'm being really honest with you. Like, these are the things you have to solve, right? And because some managers can't do that, the employee has to do it. So the
Yeah.
employee has to say, I want to have a career conversation with you. Set that up in Zoom, Teams, whatever. Call it that. Put the agenda in the meeting notice so they know what to expect, and say, I want to talk about, a path to the next level. I want to understand what's required of that, and I want to understand what you think my biggest limitations are. Then it's up to the manager to come to that meeting pretty prepared
Mhm.
and see what it is. And if you're still left like, my manager's a doink,
Right.
then you probably got to find other people back to influence, build your brand so that you have your sphere of influence
Yeah.
is wider than just your boss. And
Mhm.
I think, that was kind of I just liked people. And so I always knew everybody and, whatever. And you get into a meeting, this is, again, I think a limitation for teams, and you've got an opportunity to speak up, and, you don't want to interrupt when you're in a virtual meeting, but if you were in a room, you'd talk to somebody. So maybe it's a one-on-one and you set it up as, who's my influencers? Maybe I do a once a month virtual coffee, but it's on screen so they can get to know me. And,
Mhm.
just finding those moments that you don't have to be physically there, but the camera helps that you at least get
Yeah.
to see people and build that relationship.
That's great
But I
advice.
would be conscious of doing it very deliberately and making them accountable to a key part of their job is, if they want to be a leader, not just your manager, this is the opportunity for them to show up.
That's great. Was that helpful, Christy? I see you nodding. Yeah. Good. Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome. Yeah. Great advice. And again, coming back to, you know, personal brand and things like that, you won't get called on for things if you're not known for something. So really kind of focusing and honing in on like what it is that you want people to call on you for, that you're passionate about, that you love and that you like to do. If that's not apparent to you, it's not going to be apparent to anybody else, quite honestly. So I love that, kind of sitting down and having that career conversation directly, and then also kind of working to bolster up that wider cast net. I listened to so many great podcasts, and then I have talks here and this podcast, obviously, but I can't remember. I want to always give credit when I quote things. But somebody just said something about like, and maybe it'll come to me, or somebody listening will have been listening to the same thing I was. It was, I'm a collaborative person always, but if you won't work with me, I will work around you. Because sometimes it's like, if somebody's getting in your way, and like she said, you're having a very direct conversation with your manager and they're not, managing and or leading, then yeah, maybe you need to look in other departments, find other champions, other voices to help you. Okay, we have a couple more questions in the chat, and I want to make sure we get to them because, like I said, they're all really great. I love this one from Chris. How do you keep confidence high when encountering situations that may shake you up a little? Because leaders are human too. I like this question, Chris.
Yep. People always say like and I'll tie this to title a little bit, but like leadership, it can be lonely, right? And because you don't have, and this has been the first time I've ever built a business, and I'm not building it on my own, but started a business solely versus with other people. And there's been a lot of challenges of like, okay, I'm the only one that really has to make this decision. Which decision should I make? I didn't expect a global pandemic. I didn't expect a talent challenge in the workforce, right? And so to kind of have that confidence, I think part of it is having kind of I have a formal board of directors, but I also have an informal board of directors of people that I can just talk to and go out to and say, hey, here, I'm challenged with this, like, can I just walk you through it? What does that look like? I'm a huge fan of that thing. I also do that for, other people. But I think as far as like confidence, it's just, back to, I think maybe it's an entrepreneur being bold. You just have to kind of go for it and realize like, if I get 80% of this right, it's probably pretty good. So I think it's just from within.
Yeah. That's great. I like that advice of you're taking your emotional processing and giving it a safe space as a leader, because there's nothing wrong with being emotional as a leader, but there's nothing worse than somebody that's getting over emotional, that's meant to be leading, male or female, by the way, because that can go either way. But still acknowledging the fact that you are human and you have emotions and you need a safe place to process them. I think that's wonderful advice. And then I just remembered where that quote came from. Tony, I thought maybe you might have remembered too. It was a quote from a female tech woman who I think maybe was like the mother of the internet. I can't remember exactly now. We had the vice mayor of Cincinnati do a talk for our Cincinnati chapter yesterday. So anyways, it just came to me. Sometimes it just takes a minute, All right. Another question for one of our members in Orlando, Amber. Hey, how are you? I hope you guys are still getting the sunshine down there. How do you continue to check in? Oh, and this will be our last question because Margaret has a hard stop and I want to respect that. How do you continue to check in and create accountability with yourself as a leader and develop your leadership skills?
That's a good question. How do I continue to check in with myself? Like I said, I do have a board of directors. And so every quarter I have, I have to present like, what's the CEO update and what do I do? And it allows me a chance to kind of get out of the day to day and reflect on what have I accomplished? What am I doing? Where are we going? What does that look like? I'm also a big person that, I exercise in the morning. So I get up really early, and sometimes I watch a terrible show on, Netflix, and some mornings I don't turn on anything, and it's just my time to like think and kind of, again, get out of that. And so I think for me, it's, just making sure that I've got time to work on the business as well as in the business. And that's kind of how I talk about it. Like, and I have to be very conscious of, am I spending enough time on it or am I spending too much time in it? I think that, piece, I'm just going back to the question to make sure I answered all. I think that's the biggest piece for me on kind of how and what I do.
Yeah. Well, it seems like
I'm a work in progress. I'll tell you that. You learn along the way.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, there's days where I do a pretty good job, and there's days where I'm like, Margaret, you were a bad leader today. That was not leadership. That was all management. So
that was a good learning day, right?
It was a good learning day. Yep.
A good
I'm a
learning
learner.
day. I talked to my daughter whenever she's like, it was a bad day. I was like, it was a good learning day. Well, this has been absolutely amazing. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of your questions. I love that we had 10 minutes left after I was through with mine and you all came in with so many questions. We will have a follow-up email that will go out to all of you that has today's recording. Obviously, you can listen here in a week or two. We'll have the podcast out. And then in that as well, you'll find Margaret's LinkedIn information as well as more information about Bold Orange. Next week's Power Lounge, we're kind of continuing these leadership conversations. I was listening to a recorded meditation recently and learned about the philosophy of Ubuntu. And the story that went along with it was this man was in Africa with some children in a village and decided to put a basket of candy at the other side of this field, but under a tree, and said, whoever races to the basket, whoever gets to the basket first wins all the candy. And as he said, on your marks, get set, go, all the children grabbed hands, ran together, and got to the basket at the same time. When the children were sitting there enjoying the candy, eating together, he came over and asked, why did you all decide that you were going to run together? Nobody tried to win. And they said, well, how can one of us be happy when the rest of us aren't? And I was like, oh, I love it. And so kind of continuing this idea of bringing in additional thoughts and cultures and points of view. This very cool idea of Ubuntu. She's on with us today. I don't know if you can pop on and say hello, Clara, but Clara's here with us today listening, and she's going to be with us next week to kind of dive more in to this idea and this philosophy known as Ubuntu. So I hope all of you found this inspiring and informative. I know I did, but then again, that's just the benefit of being here. I hope that you all come back and see us next week. Margaret, thank you so much to you and all of your team at Bold Orange. Everybody that we've worked with has been amazing. Oh, there's Miss Clara. Hey, Clara.
Hi, everyone.
It's excited to have you with us next week. Thank you, Margaret.
All right, you're very welcome. Stay bold, everybody. Stay bold. You can do it.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Take care.
All right. Bye.